Yeah, we got something. This looks like it's recording. Yeah. That's right, guys. Starting soon, please stand by. It's probably buffering. It was right. We don't want to start this on here. It's actually broadcasting. I think what it's doing is it's recording. Yeah. I just wanted to test it. It tends to buffer. There's always a delay. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to do some housekeeping items. And then we're going to get Michael up here. So hopefully that's still shared. Let me make sure. Yeah, there's me. I've been on way too many of these videos. Okay, so first question, welcome to week 3. Thanks everybody for coming. We will not be at the Leonardo next week. We will not have a meeting next week, except we are working right now to have a meeting on Tuesday from air quality experts. That's from Matt Lemmers from the University of Utah, who does the MESOS data, and Bryce Bird from the state of Utah. And they will teach you and talk to you about what to look for in air quality data. So this is things like what PM 2.5, what all of these things are inside the data. So Tuesday at noon, that's when we want to be at that session. Now that will be at the Workers' Compensation Fund building in South Jordan, Utah. We will broadcast it again. Same thing, we always broadcast and always record these. But if you can be in attendance Tuesday at noon, you're going to want to be there. Okay. So other items I had, I just lost my email. There it is. So how many people right now are working on a data set? Okay, why not? I'm looking for feedback. What? Time? Anybody else? Haven't found a data set yet? You've been sending it to me, but you haven't seen them. Okay, good. I'm trying to get feedback of where these things are so that I can show you exactly where they are and where you can start working on them. Because we basically have 2 weeks here to start on these things, and that's when we really need to work on some of these data sets. And whether you succeed in the data set or not, or whether you can find it, you need to work on the data sets as much as possible. Did you have a question? So when you say what have you been doing with the data set? Are you expecting that you start scrubbing it, looking for outliers, looking for... What I'm expecting and what we hope for people to do is, Alton and Ben have both kind of showed some ways to collect and gather data and what to do with it. We provided a list of websites, just like you guys have submitted as well. We want you to start experimenting with ways to get it. And then, yeah, scrubbing what you can scrub, what you are aware of right now. The reason behind that is that that's how you learn, is to start doing those tasks, start doing those things, starting to get that process rolling, okay? So you need to be working on those data sets now and for the next 2 weeks. Yes? So I have a follow-up question on that. So when you start scrubbing the data, are you also expecting that you start looking for correlations, or are you just wanting us to look at outliers and clean up the data? Our goals are clean, defined, and accessible. So we want the data to be clean. We want you to tell us what's in there, and you may not know. In other words, you have to pull it from the site or something else to get that information. And then we want it accessible by pushing it back to that open civic data set to have all that information in one place. Right now, we are not looking for a correlation right now. That's what the analysis phase is towards the end. Yes? So I would be interested in knowing more into what workstation should have on it and what format you want it back in. So what we're looking for is, we don't care what your workstation has on it or what you use. What we want in the end is a data set that has 2 key pieces of information. A location, and that can be zip, that can be latitude, longitude, that can be something that says location, and time. And that's about it. Those are the key pieces that every piece of data that comes back is going to need. Now, there's weather stations, there's different places around the valley. You know, those are all going to come together as a correlation towards the end. Right now, all we're looking for is clean data sets that have those two pieces of information. How you do that is entirely up to you. Okay? That's why we want to give out these data sets to lots of different people and have different ways, not only of doing it, but then you learn other ways to do it as well. You have a question? So if you have a problem with these as you come to them, you go to the Google Groups link that's right here, and you ask the question. I tried to get to this site, I couldn't find this data, I tried to do this, what should I do differently? And that's where other people come up and say, okay, here's how we work this, here's how we fix this problem, here's what we do to make that better. That answers your question. Yes, sir.
So, is there a way to avoid redundancy, or are you not concerned about it? Because I may put data, somebody else will put the same data, somebody else will put the same data, that's wasted effort.
Yes, there will be duplication. There absolutely will be duplication. This cooperation, this during the summer, is not about just, it's not about having a lot of duplicate. It's about experience, yes. It's about learning. It's about getting better. We don't mind if everyone in this room runs the same data set. No problem with that. We want, in the end, to end up with one of them, and we'll do that deduplication. But right now, we want you to learn, and we want you to get better at those things.
Although there are two things that we're trying to do to help get rid of some of that. One, we're trying to look at all the data sets and make sure we don't duplicate the actual data set, right?
Which I have.
And Pat's been doing that. As you continue to send data sets to Pat, he'll continue to do that. And then the second one is the JIRA board. As you're logging what you're doing, it'll be easier to tell the community, oh, somebody's working on this.
Yeah, so if you go to bigdatautah.org, right over here, there's a link for JIRA board. And I'm going to use the Open Data Services. No, where do you put my link? Oh, there we go. There it is. List the current data sets in JIRA. So this takes you to a little filter, if I can click properly. Not big on the surface, sorry. This will open up a list in JIRA of all the data sets currently sitting there. And if JIRA would stop giving us these fun little pop-ups. So these are the ones I entered this morning. Now, everybody that submitted one on that form, that's on the main site, you can keep submitting them. Please, please keep submitting them as you find them. Everybody that submitted one, I put it in here as a JIRA ticket. Okay? So there's information in that ticket. There's a URL, there's who submitted it, there's information about it, so that you can find exactly that data set and then work on it. Now, if you set up an account on JIRA, you can't have everybody taking ownership of each one, but I would suggest you watch the issue. If you watch the issue, as I update it, as I change it, as I do any comments to it, you'll get emails about that. You'll be aware of what's going on. Okay? So my suggestion is watching the issue. Again, since we have lots of people doing it, we can't assign it to 15 people. It's going to be assigned to me, but we're going to watch it through here. All right? So this talks all about, like I said, this goes out and finds whatever someone has submitted. It puts the information inside here. It gives you a link to where it is. And then if there's comments of something I've done, then I'll add that in there. Yes, sir?
I have a question. I'm not familiar with
JIRA.
how JIRA works. So you say watch the issue. Is the issue going to be all the data sets or a specific one?
Each one, you'll be watching one issue. Each one has its own JIRA ticket. Think of a ticket like a bug system. Yes.
Yeah, can you explain definitions of epic, project?
Well, for now, they're all just tasks. They're all just stories, essentially. They're all one story for each bug, or each task. So each data set has its own. The only one that's separate, I will say one thing, the only one that's separate is the one that we originally put up, has several subtasks under it. Let's see, where is the air quality? Air weather data, this one right here. Because all of this data has been brought to us entirely, the entire MESO-West data is sitting and waiting for us. These are all the links inside it for that one. So everything to do with MESO-West is under this one ticket. You can look at each one of these, and you'll have a link to where to go and get the files, to go and get the pieces. So, and this is a nice 5 gig data set, I believe, that if you go out, I believe to this link that's underneath here, there's a 5 gig file you can basically pick up and start working on it with all the Salt Lake City air quality data in it in one nice little spot. Matt, who will be talking on Tuesday, is the one that put that together for us. So So this is a great ticket to look at if you want to get into more of these sets. This also has some Python code in it that helps the processing. So, okay, so this is the big list right now. And as more come in, I'm going to keep adding them. We are talking to the state right now. We're working on a 9 terabyte traffic data set, okay? We're not going to put 9 terabytes right in Jira. There's no way it will fit. But we're working on places to store it, working on SandSpace for it, and then everybody will get login so they can work on it from that aspect as well. Okay? We're very close on that. It's the state of Utah. It takes a little while to do things, so we will get there. But as I add more data sets, that's where they'll show up. Okay? Does this make sense to everybody? And like I said, you can get to this without a Jira account. But I do suggest you create a Jira account, and that way you can watch the tickets. Jira accounts are free. This is a not-for-profit org that we have, so it's not like you're committing to anything. It's just a Jira ticket. I mean, it's just a login. Right? Yeah.
Can I mention the companies that are real quick that
Yeah.
are looking at possibilities? So Cloudera is going to provide thousands of dollars, not sure exactly how much yet, for AWS services. So that will be extremely helpful. I mean, you can hold 10 terabytes for $250 a month on Cloudera. So we'll be able to get a lot of storage space there. Processing power, we'll be able to do some cool things there as well. And then we have several companies right now that are trying to decide what they can provide as far as SANs, et cetera. And 1 or 2 of those are also thinking about providing a lab for us so that we have a space to go in and work as well. So we'll give you the details as they come out, but we're trying to pick the ones that are going to be the best and most local to make the most sense for us as a community.
Okay, so the only other thing I have is kind of what I started off with too. Start working. No one in this room is competing. No one is competing whatsoever. You are cooperating to help each other out. Because in the end, you're all going to be using the same data to compete, so you better make that data as good as possible. So please work together. Please get out there, try some of these data sets, and if nothing else, let us know what didn't work, because we can fix it on the fly and we can make adjustments so that you can get to these things and make it better. But,
although keep in mind, tasks that you complete will give prizes out for.
I was just going to say that.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, as Nick mentioned, there are sponsors coming in. We have lots of sponsors talking to us. Start handing out little gift cards, things like that for work that you do. You know, that's what we're looking for. We want to incentivize people, but we also want you to work together as a community to really fill out all these data sets. Okay, any other questions on the operational stuff? Questions in general on the air quality side of things? So Tuesday at noon, you'll see a newsletter from me. As soon as I have that later today, there will probably be a newsletter. Make sure you are signed up for the newsletter. I can't stress this enough either. Back at bigdatautah.org, back, bigdatautah.org, right down here towards the bottom, there's a form, and we can click anywhere in this thing. Right here, sign up for the newsletter right there. We're not doing many more than, say, once a week, but this is our master method of communication. Everything we do, the change of this location, everything is sent through there. So please make sure you're signed up for that. All right. Okay, I think it's time for Michael to get up here. Let's switch over to the PowerPoint. Everybody can take a minute if you need to. Grab another pizza. Not a whole pizza. All right, let's where it should be.
Oh, it's great things.
Well, that's what I was worried about. It always likes to do that. But now we got to make sure it's the right screen. How do we get to
Does everybody feel like they're ready to start working tomorrow on all of this? Maybe 1 or 2.
Yeah, you did that with, that's great.
It's buffer. It'll take a second. I'll go and check. Okay.
All right. So today, Pat and Nick, I guess they asked me to talk about the process of gathering data, and I guess, you know, it couldn't help but also talk talk about storing and sharing it, right? So when you gather it, it's not just like, oh wow, here it is, and you have problems or challenges associated with putting it somewhere, right? Questions, what format, where, and then logically, I guess you work on your data all on your own, but you get a lot more value if you start collaborating and trying to do here for the competition. So for today, I have a few objectives. We'll go over those. Talk to you about the motivation for the framework that I'll describe around gathering data. Just sort of formalize the process that I follow from my own experience when doing something sort of like this. And I guess the motivation involves discussing some of the challenges associated with data gathering, storing, and sharing. So we'll kind of use that to prime everyone's brains, go through the framework, which will be abstract, and then at the end we'll probably have hopefully a rich discussion around how does that framework address challenges and whatnot. But interrupt me anytime through the presentation. They're always better when that occurs. Okay, so again, the objectives here, we'll take a look at the motivation, right, for this presentation. Why we bothered putting it in the agenda in the first place. And at the end of the day, we'll take sort of pain-based motivation, right? What are all the pains that we face when we're at this stage in the process of doing analysis or building models? Then we'll review the framework that hopefully we can all use, customized to our own working styles, and basically manage the time that we spend on data gathering by being effective in our approach.
Next.
Oh, there we go. You fixed it. Look at that. Being effective in our approach. Anyway, but we'll go into with that. It looks like coming out of this, I'd like for folks to try some version of this in their own workflow, right? The data gathering phase, there's no, I think there's one book on data preparation for data mining, right? If you look on Amazon, you'll find it, and we all kind of just get it done, right? But interestingly, it's where we spend so much of our time. And as far as time sucks go, data gathering is no different, right? When we're not handed a set of sources to work with, we have more work to do when it comes to collecting data sources. Okay. And then around your expectations, just interrupt. It's my first time here. I haven't met many of you, but I like interruptions. All right. Little introduction for the audience, just kind of like get a sense for who's in it. But who's planning on competing? If show of hands. Almost everybody. It's okay. Yeah, it's good. And then I kind of, some people have both types of experience, but I like to get a sense for who has experience in machine learning, and then in addition, or who has experience with information management, basically data management of some sort, right? And so I like to do 1 to 3 scales, right? So from information management perspective, 1 being the least experienced, 3 being an expert. Who's a 1 in information management? Okay. Who's a 2? High. All right. And who's a 3? Information management. High, as high as you can. Okay. Those are information management experts. This will resonate presentation-wise, I suppose, with a lot of your experiences. And in machine learning, who's a 1? Okay. Who's a 2? And who's a 3? Okay. There's 1 expert in the room. Okay, okay, but
please do realize that they're actually volunteering.
Yeah. Okay. Well, 3 is very dangerous to sort of volunteer, especially if there's only 1 of you. Then it becomes, well, how do I do this? But I think the 2s are probably, there's a lot of 2.5s in here as well. But okay. A little bit about me. Most interestingly, my background is in software engineering, and then when I went back to graduate school, my focus was human-computer interaction, because we built a lot of crappy software in the late 90s for users. But then I took a data mining course and fell in love, and then I sort of focused my career then towards analytics. So as analytics has evolved into what it is today, I've been really well poised to take advantage of how we do analytics today, right? So really fun to me. Okay. So as mentioned earlier, as we've all experienced, I'm not watching my time. How long have I been on? No, really? Oh man. Okay, I'll go
Yeah, 30 minutes, you're good.
Okay. We spend a disproportionate amount, right? Most of us, 80% of our time is, we talk about spending 80% of our time on data prep, right? But data gathering adds a whole extra set of challenges associated with it, right? Which have similar challenges to data preparation, right? You kind of get lost. Hours, days can go by in the data gathering process. And you need to sort of put things in place to sort of govern yourself against yourself, right? But sort of thinking about high-level challenges at this point. But data preparation, data gathering, sorry, is different from data prep. We kind of lump them together. But data preparation, we were speaking a little bit about earlier. So we're sort of talking about how do we clean the data? How do we look for correlations? How do we derive data right at that point? We're going to talk about that in the later session. So specific to data gathering, we have challenges around domain experience, right? So what that means is that when you're trying to gather data about air quality, when you know nothing about air quality, it's kind of hard, right? And so you kind of have to take that into consideration, right? You need to really be self-aware with respect to how resourceful you are, how much hustle you have, and what your technical skills are around this process, right? I think generally we don't stop and assess what our strengths and weaknesses are, and we try to do something the way someone else has done it. It doesn't really work for us, right? So it's really important to understand that. As a result of some of those things, we sometimes find ourselves collecting way too many or way too few data sources, right, for our objectives. The idea that there's evil free data and good free data, right? So just because it's free doesn't mean it's good and useful for us. And there's sort of virtually free good data that can be really valuable. When you place a value on your time, paying $300 for a set of data isn't necessarily such a bad idea. But sometimes you're like, I don't want to spend $300 for the data when it's so free out there, right? When it takes you a day to write a scraper and test it to get the data free, thankfully, it's not really free. Okay. Considering time boxing everything that isn't analysis or model building is really, really important. It's a challenge, right? So it's easy, like I said, like I alluded to earlier, it's easier for hours and days to go by in these phases if you're not careful. Unlimited data sets, this kind of speaks to the storage and how we share it, right? So it's great to get a lot of data, but then somehow collaborating and sharing and moving it around to process it can be a bit of a challenge. And you can sort of solve that early in the process if you know what your target environment is going to be. And then finally, wheel reinvention. I think we alluded to this early. People are going to go after the state. Like, we're all contributing in this project, but even in general, people within organizations or even spanning organizations pull the same data and clean it over and over again. So collaboration is really important to consider. All the wasted time associated with this. And so how do we raise awareness around that? So let's look at this data gathering framework. And I got my laser. I'll just point it. So like anything that you're going to do, right, it's good to sort of, it breaks down into three main phases, right? The definition approach, the data gathering iterations, and then this phase where you integrate your data and build CRUDE models. Kind of do that over and over again, and then finally you get into this sort of formally preparing the data. Okay, and so the first part is really about understanding where you are within your organization, within your project, and within the data gathering subtasks, right? So in other words, high level, what are you trying to achieve, right? Because when you go off on the path of looking for data, kind of not exactly aimlessly, but when you're wandering around looking for data, you find you've been going somewhere down a path for an hour. So what are my objectives, right? The second step I alluded to earlier, but it's about assessing your own tendencies as someone who might go on and look for and gather data, right? What are you good at sort of focusing? What sort of techniques do you use to sort of time box that And what are you going to have a tendency to do? And should you maybe partner up with someone who has tendencies otherwise that are complementary? Right? Basically, form a support group. And then finally, well, that was assessing the data gathering skills. Assessing the domain experience is sort of similar, right? The idea there is that be fully aware of how much you do or don't know about a given topic and plan for doing some research in advance, potentially. And then you get into the gather data iterations. And the idea here is that we do source it, sniff it, store it, and then assess where we've gotten to collectively, right? And you keep going through that. Ideally for 2 iterations, at least 2 data sources. It has to do with this part. But the idea is sourcing is going and getting some data set that sort of represents something that fits into your objectives. Go ahead.
So how do you know whether the data you are getting is relevant or not relevant? And at what step do you start finding that out?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
How do you assess the relevancy
Yeah, the relevance.
of the data? At what step and how do you do it?
Okay, I'll repeat the question. How do we assess the relevancy of the data? And it's a good point. And this is why this is iterative, and you have this step here, because you might think that it's relevant. And you should spend no time. It looks really relevant. You go through, get through this phase, and kind of assess where you are, right? And the idea here is that you do, you don't do all of this, and then all of this, and then all of this, and so on, because you'll spend too much time inventing something. And yeah, so doing it is how you discover the relevancy, right? Especially when you try to integrate it and build some sort of crude model, you'll see kind of how relevant it is. Now, if it's not relevant because you don't have the domain experience to assess that, that's just a cost of working in an area where you don't have domain experience. But, yeah, go ahead.
But your cognitive bias can come in and you can start thinking it is relevant because of the cognitive bias, right?
Yeah, and so good point about your cognitive biases will have a huge influence on basically all decisions that you make along the way. Use something that you could use to sort of guard against that sort of cognitive biases associated with the anchoring or whatnot might be to ensure that you're collaborating with people who have different skills. Right? You know what I mean? You can sort of define your collaborators to be people who will tend to have different cognitive biases than you, and then collectively what rises to the top might be the best. But it's good point. But again, it's not perfect, right? This is just kind of, and then there is a general theme around all of this is you time box a whole darn thing. So you force yourself to spend only so much time on it, and then you end up moving into your formal data preparation phase, which you should also consider time boxing and running to the end of the whole modeling process. And then saying, now with all this other information that I have, what might I go get, right? Fundamentally different when you go through this process after you've gone end to end with some sort of model, beyond these CRUDE models, okay? Good question. Oh. Yeah. We'll talk more about the other ones in a second, okay? But those main phases, right, and sort of what are the objectives of each? And the idea here is the defined approach is really, right, we're taking a realistic, growth-oriented, aligned approach to gathering data, right? And so you shouldn't just, you work to your strengths, essentially, as far as like what your domain experience is and what your abilities are for gathering data, technically, and otherwise. And it's very common for us, especially in this discipline, to sort of create a baby step for us to get a little bit better. So let's say your technical skills are weak in a certain area, and you realize that's sort of impeding you from being effective at gathering or preparing data. So you might decide, hey, this is where I am in this technical area. However, I'm going to use this data gathering approach, this data gathering experience to build a skill, right? But I'm not going to go try to do something I've never done before, 5 new things, because that'll just get you bogged down in learning. While I've seen people who have no technical skills collect a whole bunch of data. It looks painful for me to watch, but they get the job done, right? And so that's, remember our objective for the whole process. So the idea for defining an approach is that it needs to be aligned with the project, with the organization, and ideally some sort of elements of growth for the individual. Gather data, it's really about being efficient with respect to data sources pursued, right? And this is kind of the question you brought up, how do you know what's relevant or not? I mean, people don't make good broad decisions, generally, right? they experiment. Those who make good decisions or seem to make good decisions over time are serial experimenters. And so the idea is kind of like, tuck it out there, and if it's easy to process and it's got some tiny little bit of value, not too bad. If it's hard to process but it's got a ton of marginal value, that's great too. But if something's just kind of dying because of your peers are kind of saying to you, I'm not seeing it here, or it's just so difficult and it's ambiguous as to what the marginal benefit will be from it, then you end it and you move on to the next thing. Integrating and building the CRUDE model early, okay? We're actually, we're basically trying to mitigate risk of downstream issues with the data. So all we're trying to do with the integration is see what connects like really, really easily, and then run like a simple regression, right? Some learner that's friendly to categorical and numeric attributes, and then you can sort of see how things are fitting together and do they make sense. Run summary statistics, do some viz if you really want to. The idea is that we're just trying to imagine, we've all done this before, right? Collected all this data, and then you're going to connect it and something's not there. And sometimes it's at the integration point, and sometimes it's at the modeling point. The granularity's off, or something, right? And maybe some data that we capture is like, as for scrapers, for example, is like contextual to the time. We can't really go back in time to get it. The way that we got it anyway, right? So really important to kind of, while you're data gathering, especially if you're using the time of capture, which is very common in scraping, to do this stuff. All right. So setting objectives, again, I've covered this before. Almost everything in the subsequent slides is something I've spoken to, at least at a high level. So I'll whiz through these items. But when your objectives, don't just think about the project's objective, right? Or more the lower level, the data gathering objective, right? Think about the organizational objective, because you do have to make trade-offs. Because when you start looking at the ocean of possibilities, and the project levels get all data about air quality, it's too big. The overall project objectives and/or the organizational objectives can influence what your choices are, and hopefully make things a little bit. Okay. Assessing your domain experience. I mean, 1 to 5, 1 to 3 scales are good. Here's contrast, and probably more of us are in the. I'm assuming the majority of us are in kind of the 1 domain experience category here. And there might be people that are more experienced with air quality. They've done research already. But in the case of being a 1, you have to plan on doing some background research. Even though it feels like, oh, I'll learn about it while modeling it or gathering the data, which is partially true, but it makes gathering data isn't like reading a web page, right? There's always some extra overhead, as well as reading of the web page, right? And so separating the tasks, committing a little bit up front, can create a lot of opportunities. Someone's got more experience might just kind of, find an expert and say, okay, remind me where things stand, right? You know what I mean? Like, let's have the hour conversation, let's go for lunch, that type of thing. So you want to define your approach, be cognizant of it. And this is kind of, the next stage is about self-reflection, so saying, what am I good at, basically, right? And design your approach to focus on what you're try to get better at how I store this data and collaborate on it, or am I just going to use Dropbox again? It's fine, right? Make that choice, but take baby steps in the areas that you want to evolve. I think we all have this idea, or many of us have this idea, I'm going to go find the person who's best at this and do what they do. And that's sometimes super hard to overcome in the short term. There's a ton of information on this slide, but this is your iteration, okay? And so with source data, we just kind of get this data pretty quickly, pretty crudely. We sniff it. We're looking for general quality, right? In alignment with our objectives. That's the sniff, right? So you kind of extract a little bit of data, run some summary stats, something like that. Look for any sort of gaps, that type of thing. So, high level, right? But, I mean, don't get it and assume you got it, right? A lot of people I've watched get the data, start piling it up, and don't look at it for a month later or a few weeks later, and then they realize they don't have some of it, right? They have to go back and get it if they can. Sometimes they can. Store the data somewhere that's accessible, similar to the properties that we're achieving for our data, but accessible, inexpensive, fast enough to work with, and reliable, right? So generally, inexpensive and fast are things that are related. And Generally if you're storing a lot of data, you'll give up on speed if you want it expensive, right? And then you want it to be reliable and accessible to other collaborators, ideally, right? Because that's where it's going to end up, almost always. Even if you're running on a project on your own, you're always going to have this scenario where, can you come look at my data? Can you just see something that I'm not looking? If you're not collaborating on a project, I mean, even if it's not meant to be collaborative, you're kind of missing out on probably a huge marginal gain. And then finally, the coming up for the air is kind of what I'm trying to depict here, is that that's what the assessment is, right? So go through an iteration as quick as you can, do the sniff, source sniff, store somewhere, and then go back to your original objectives. What kind of gaps and overlaps are there in your data sets? If there's overlaps, you can sort of do some sort of quality assessment saying, let's keep one, not the other, let's keep them both. Until we don't really know if one's better or worse than the other in qualities. And we've hopefully automated a lot of this. Having two sets that have high overlap isn't necessarily a big deal. Ease of working with the source. As we know, some sources are easier than working with others. So these are all criteria you might sort of look at and say, even though it's all here, it's here and we've got 90% overlap, I'm just going to remove this data because it impedes me from focusing on other things. Okay? Hoarding everything isn't necessarily the best approach. It just creates confusion downstream. So the integrate and build CRUDE model, again, the objective there is to sort of find linkages that miss when you're trying to integrate things, and then sometimes they look like they've integrated, but when you do some sort of simple model on them, you realize, yeah, the integration technically worked, but it's not quite right, right? We've got different granularities of data or something like that. So these are the things that kind of help you kind of sort those out. The idea here is let's use a learner that's fast. Don't necessarily even use your favorite learner for this. I use like ordinary LM and R is what I use a lot of just to kind of run stuff through because it'll automatically transform categorical variables for me. It's really fast and it helps help you just see the data. Okay. For data doesn't integrate, in the spirit of kind of moving on, experimenting, note it and move on. Right? But importantly, I should have highlighted note it. I mean, you do want to note it because you will have some sort of downstream integration issue. But the idea is that we're not solving integration problems here, except identifying that integration is the source of the gathering. So, if the integration problem is a granularity problem from the source, we can solve that now through data gathering. If it's some sort of complexity associated with integration that has nothing to do with the source, it's just the complexity of the data, we'll solve that in data preparation. Okay, so again, I wanted to bring folks back to the challenges and start our discussion, right? And understand what other challenges you're facing and how the framework maybe adjust that or address those challenges. So what other challenges do folks faced while either gathering or preparing data that we haven't covered?
Security issues.
Security issues. Is that you, Nick?
So identifiable information, whether it's healthcare data, tax data, etc.
Okay, good. That adds challenges to probably how you store your information, at least, if not others, right? And it limits your collaboration abilities and whatnot. So it's interesting. I didn't address that at all, but it's a good point.
I mean, you talk about this, but I find over and over again scope drift based on ease of gathering.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. You start to chase rabbits when you kind of convince yourself that they go like, these are my objectives. That's probably going to be really useful. It's going to be really helpful. And you go through this, data gathering and the first pass data analysis, right? And oh, this was easier to do. I'm just going to do this. And I know I've gone all the way to the bottom, come back with the model and stuff, and they're like, that's not even close to what we want. Correct. Still done.
Yeah, I mean, I guard against the drift with time boxing.
Yeah.
Right, and I'll always end the time box early if I feel like I have enough. But I never go. Say never. If I was capacity, I'm sure I've gone over a few times, but I generally try to hold my time boxes at what I intended and really grind through a really awful experience, kind of modeling it down through, so I can see it, those things.
I guess with like a problem like air quality, there's so much exploratory opportunity.
Sure.
That you could easily kind of convince yourself, yeah, I can do what I promised I would do.
Well, yeah, okay, you could rationalize it midstream, but do the rationalization between iterations. Yeah. Discipline, right? This is that step, you know, assessing what you have up until now, right? And you'll notice it's kind of like you just added a new store. It's dead easy. You kind of stop and you do this. Before you go add 5 more of them, and you realize they're kind of all kind of overlapping. And even though they're easy, you know, that type of thing, right? So this is kind of the heart of it all. To sort of every once in a while come up.
No, I wasn't saying. I don't think it's missing for Nirvana. Maybe it would help to just give a story, like doing risk analysis. Got my hands on this enormous data set, and it was just so much fun to play with, and it was so freaking wide that I'm like, this is awesome. And when I was done, I did time back box, but when I was done, I realized, you know what, like I already had a variable. I needed the features that were most impactful. I already had it beforehand. And this was just kind of really engaging. And, yeah, and so it's good to check yourself because I don't know.
Right, you said what's that called? Again?
Pomodoro,
right?
Yeah, I agree.
It's a version.
5 minutes have to take a strategic look.
But it's almost no different data gathering than your formal data preparation phases. A lot of elements are simpler. But the difference is this: by beefing up on a little domain experience by partnering or doing your own research, you chase way few.
That's right, way
fewer sources.
Right.
And then by assessing your own skills, you basically don't burn all your time trying to learn Python. You know, you just use R because you know that's what you're doing. So and that's because it's so important to get to even past here to get to here.
Yeah.
Because that's where it really starts to catch momentum and gather people's interest. People want this problem to go away, but it's so critical to to the process of finding
involving other people too. I found sometimes you take a break and you're unconsciously ignorant, right? It's good to be conscientiously ignorant. You're like, yeah, I probably don't know how to do this. I don't suppose any of you have ever had this unconsciously ignorant problem. But yeah, I've run into it a couple times. So you call somebody on the phone or you email somebody and just ask. And I'm assuming competency, right? A lot of times you're like, oh, I was ignorant about that. There's a better approach.
Yeah. I mean, there's a tendency also for all of us, you mentioned calling someone or emailing them. I don't like talking to people that much, but I force myself to call people because I don't like talking to people, and I know I kind of, and that forces better, richer conversations about things and helps me understand what I don't know a little bit better than email. When I email someone, I ask for the answer that they give me, whereas in the conversation you feel like,
no, I have a standing desk in the corner of the closed door. Not talking to people.
Any other questions? Any other challenges that people have faced in gathering or preparing data? Okay. Both of you, are we good to go?
What?
Are we good to go? Wind us down?
Like I said, I can't hear you.
I said, oh, I'm sorry.
We've got 2 minutes before one. He's asking. Yeah, keep going.
Keep going.
Oh, keep going.
Oh, I think we're
asking if it's okay.
Yeah.
I think we're ready to applaud.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
2 quick announcements just while Michael was speaking. I forgot to mention October 25th is the Big Mountain Data Conference event. That is set. It's going to be at the University of Utah Business Building. It'll have all tracks about all data, all different topics. And we're looking for speakers too as well. We haven't opened registration or speaker call yet. We will very soon. But make sure you mark down October 25th, the University of Utah. It's going to be a great event. Tuesday at noon, I just got that secured. Tuesday at noon, we will have 2 air quality experts coming to the Workers' Compensation Fund building in South Jordan, Utah. Again, I'll send you a newsletter tonight about the exact location and everything, but
Tuesday at noon, there will be a session on what air quality is, what you can do about it, and much more information about the data. So you have more better domain knowledge. So, anything else? If not, thank you very much for coming. I'm sure Jen will let us hang around for a little bit. Grab some pizza if you want on your way out, or leave it for Jen and her colleagues at Black Diamond. Oh, thank you very much, Black Diamond, for hosting us. Okay, thanks. All right.